Hi, welcome to Out in New Haven. I'm your host, John Allen. And this is a show where we talk about LGBTQ issues in New Haven and Connecticut around the state. Before we begin, I'd like to just share a little bit about the New Haven Pride Center, which this is a program of the New Haven Pride Center. We're the first LGBT center in the city of New Haven and currently one of only two in Connecticut. And there's been many exciting developments going on at the New Haven Pride Center. The center is located in downtown New Haven, close to public transportation, and there's been several new staff to assist with programming that's reflective of the community interests. The center also hosts the only queer arts studio in the state of Connecticut that's dedicated to queer arts, and there's an exhibit that changes every 2 months. And we're home to many different organizations in the state, including the GLSEN organization, which is for Gay, Lesbian, Straight Teachers Network. And there's many other activities that are throughout the week. But the center is also host to the Dorothy Awards, which is the largest LGBTQ award ceremony in the state. We just held the 16th annual show, and this is where LGBTQ people that are helping to make Connecticut a great state for LGBTQ people, and they're offered awards for their incredible work that they do. The center also hosts a magazine which talks about issues that are important to our community. And in September, we'll be hosting the Pride celebrations, which has now evolved into a week-long series of events and activities, culminating with a march around the city and a block party. And then on the next day, I'll be giving my walking tour of downtown New Haven, 400 years of queer history in the Elm City. And we go through all 9 squares and talk about queer history that's been going on in the state since the founding of our state. But today it gives me great pleasure to talk about a subject that's near and dear to so many of us, and that's on LGBT families. And I can think of no one else better to talk about it with than my sister, Dr. Catherine Allen, who is Professor of Human Development and Family Science at Virginia Tech. Welcome, sis.
Thank you, John, for having me. I love your show. I watch every program, and I'm very happy to be here with you.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much. Well, this is right up your alley because you are a family studies scholar at Virginia Tech, and we're going to be talking about your new book that is going to be coming out, your 8th book about families, and specifically LGBTQ families. And, you know, as I was thinking about the show today, I realized, we've been talking about this in our family for about 40 years now, where, I've been out almost that long, and we've realized that we have many gay and lesbian people within our family. But when we talk about LGBTQ families, what do we mean? What do you think that means?
Well, like any family, we have our families of origin, the families that we are born into, and with our parents and our siblings, and we have families of creation. So the families that we create through marriage, adoption, stepkin, and also families of choice. So our families, we have, like other minority families, we have had to step outside the lines often, and chosen kin are very much a part of the families that we create. So,
feel so fortunate that we've grown up in a family where we were supported as people who were different. And each of us, we're one of 5 children. I'm the oldest boy. You're the next in, I was right after you. I have 2 sisters and 2 younger brothers. And our parents really celebrated the uniqueness of each each one of us. And I know from experience that that doesn't happen often.
That's true. And I would also add, sort of humorously, but also seriously, that our parents, we both came out around the same time. I thought I probably came out before you, though I had been previously married. So no one was really expecting me to come out as a lesbian. But they really didn't embrace it until the favorite son came out. So there is a little bit of patriarchy in that family that I have.
It's so nice to be the favorite one.
That I
right?
have had to, challenge and fight against. But yes, I would say our parents were activists, joining your cause in the Connecticut area for being open and affirming through their religious institution and also with their families and others. But we do come from a long line of people who we've had many relatives who are also in this.
Right, and certainly as we go back and look at them, hindsight, we can realize who was and who wasn't, and they've been both celebrated and demonized.
Yes,
just like society.
Yes, but I think it's just the importance of activism too, of finding your voice, and I do really celebrate you for that, being activist about. That there's all kinds of families, there are all kinds of individuals, and we all deserve a seat at the table, at the family dinner table. And we've had that.
Right,
so.
Yes, we certainly have. And it's such an exciting time to be in this field, I would think, because it's also new. I mean, we're in the 50th anniversary of Stonewall and the founding of the modern LGBTQ movement, but yet this seems to be a new frontier family, creating LGBTQ families.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I wrote a paper with David Demo called, the New Frontier LG parent family, lesbian and gay parent families, because we really had to start someplace. We had to start with the experiences of, we were still very binary then, back in the 90s when we were writing about this, when it was getting into the scholarly literature en masse. And so, but now things have grown exponentially. Right. So we do talk about families. We used to just talk about families in the gay community formed through post-heterosexual marriage and divorce.
So people leaving marriages with children already created out of trying to live a heterosexual existence, and people realizing, and now
there's so many ways that people, and our book, the book that I am co-editing with Abby Goldberg, who is an internationally recognized scholar of LGBTQ parent families.
And she's at Clark University in Worcester.
She's a professor of psychology at Clark University.
Right.
And this is the second edition of our book.
Yeah, so this is the book that...
The original.
The original from 2013.
Yes.
And so the new book is actually going to include a Q at the end.
Yes,
in the ever-expanding alphabet of our community. It's going to include the Q. Yeah. And what are some of the new things that are going to be in that?
Well, we are keeping the same format. We're talking about there's overview chapters that really talk about where the most research has been done. And what I don't want to put a little plug in about the book. It's very important. All of this is based on analysis of original research. So it's it's multifaceted. So we're looking at research, empirical data, at theories that are used to examine families, and also the practice, the activist end as well. But originally, we're talking about families formed post-heterosexual marriage and divorce, intentional families created by two lesbians who come together and then they plan their families. We have
donor insemination, through adoption, maybe.
Yes, and through surrogacy. We also we've added some chapters that deal with families in which foster parenting in the LGBTQ community,
which is really huge in Connecticut. I mean, the Department of Children and Families is always recruiting within the LGBTQ community to make sure that a single and gay couples can foster and adopt.
Yes, and that unfortunately that doesn't happen in every state, but in this country, and some other countries have been progressive. Australia, our author is from Australia who wrote about that, and have been more progressive than we are, but it is a growing edge. And also we have chapters about LGBTQ parent families, including in polyamorous relationships with multiple parents, multiple spouses.
Right. It takes a
and
village
partners.
to raise a child, right?
Definitely does.
Right.
And we have a young scholar, Megan Carroll, who's introduced the topic of asexuality
Wow.
and its implications for LGBTQ parent families. And we have a lot. There's just been a burgeoning amount of information about trans issues, transparent families. I love that, transparent families. And then trans kids too.
Well, you know, the movement, there's so much going
Yeah.
on right now about trans
Yes.
interests and really
Yes.
celebrating people that just don't fit
Yes.
into a binary
Yes.
silo.
And I would say, if you think about a lot of the, those individuals have also been targeted by, politicians, et cetera.
Right.
And so that's a growing edge too for advocacy work and changing, more knowledge about that. So that's what's beautiful about this book, I think, is that we have scholars from 8 different countries all over
Wow.
the world who are contributing. And we're also addressing non-Western perspectives, like what's happening in Israel, what's happening in in Mexico, what's happening in Middle Eastern countries, et cetera, all over the world, Africa.
Right.
So we're looking at that. And,
Because so many of those countries are not favorable to LGBTQ interests,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
frightening.
Yeah, so it's the best of times and the worst of times. We've had so much growth and movement in our own country, thank goodness, thanks to activists who have put their lives on the line for this, and researchers who have pioneered it. And we do dedicate our book to the pioneers as well as to our students and the new scholars that are coming along.
Yeah.
But one thing I'm really excited about are the family of origin issues. And there's a chapter, Katie Barrow is the first author of a chapter about LGBTQ siblings. So there's
Which is us. Now,
Yes.
the thing that's so
Yes.
interesting about you is that you were in a heterosexual
Yes.
marriage,
Yes.
and then and produced a child,
And had my son.
and then
We
you divorced?
amicably ended our
Amicably.
relationship and
Right.
repartnered, and I married. Well, there was no legal marriage. We had a commitment ceremony, and then we were along with you and your husband Keith. We were the 30 and 31st couples to
Right,
be
in
to have
Brattleboro.
a civil union in Vermont.
in 2000.
Yes, in
July
2000. Sadly, about 6 weeks later, my partner left me after that, which was a very devastating experience. But but you guys stayed together, so I guess if the marriage, that's pretty much par for the course. But I was in a lesbian partnership and raised our children. My son Matthew, who was born to his father and I in a heterosexual relationship, and then we had Zachary, who was born, may I say,
Yeah.
to my former partner and to your husband. He was our donor, so we had a very intentional family
A very intentional
and lived
family.
this way for many years. And then sadly my partner fell in love with someone else, and that happens, and left our family, ended its reign there. And I was a single parent for several years with my son Matthew in his teenage years. And then I found a new partner, my current spouse, my final spouse, I hope. I mean, that's enough. My partner, Jeff, and we are married and have been together for 15 years.
Yeah, I
so
can't
I've
believe
had
it's been
quite a
15
checkered
right.
marital
Oh, yeah.
and sexual orientation
And
history.
so while you've gone from, in a
Yeah.
a heterosexual type marriage to a
Yes.
lesbian marriage to now a heterosexual type marriage,
Yes.
but yet you don't identify as
Oh, no.
heterosexual.
I really identify that with the reclamation of the word queer. So I consider myself a queer researcher and a queer family scholar. And that word is always held. That never turned me on when we were kids, and you
Right,
would call
no.
people that as a derogatory name. I always liked it. I liked that it started with a Q. I just love the Q.
Right.
I love the.
I love it because it's just so easy to
Yes,
say, and
yeah.
it's so inclusive. You
Though
know, because we're such a disparate community.
Yes.
With so many different components to it, and yet it's all inclusive.
I will say that I agree with you, John. And in some of my own research, I really do appreciate and like studying and working with lesbians of a certain age. I mean, I come out of the feminist movement from the 60s and 70s, and always, even though, you know, I guess I have always been bisexual. I've always had male and or female partners throughout my life, but I identify with a movement that was called lesbian feminism, and it was really women who were protesting the patriarchy. So that's always been the political motivation for my work. And I've continued to study lesbians, and I really like studying lesbians of a certain age, and to see how they're aging into adulthood, later adulthood, and their families. And so that's really one of my favorite topics, and I identify with that. Though I do not live that way now, so what?
Right.
You know, I'm out of the closet about that,
Right.
about having once really embraced my lesbian identity and then being flung out of it, you know, through no fault of my own, and having to come to grips with how I identify and who I am. So.
Well, you know, the bisexual community just seems to be so misunderstood, and so I think, you know, and we see this at the center, that people really are, there's, you know, pockets all around of people that are looking for identity with the bisexual community, and I guess maybe it's something that people just really don't understand.
Yes, it's hard to talk about these things. It's, you know, people will say, well, why do you have to announce yourself? Well, I would like to tell you who I am from my perspective. You know,
I know. I think we all try to just put people, you know, okay, so you're in a, you know, you've got a partner who's opposite gender, then you must be heterosexual,
right?
You know, but that's not it.
Yes, I remember when we went to one of the Pride marches. We used to take the children on back in the day, many years ago, and my favorite T-shirt was "How dare you assume I'm a heterosexual?" So. Anyway,
I know.
Not that there's anything wrong with being heterosexual.
Right. No, there's some of my best friends are.
So anyway, and I will say we are not shying. One of the great things about the scholarship on LGBTQ parent families now is that we have come of age, and we are not shying away from the difficult topics. So we're not just trying to paint the picture about look how far we've come. We've also have to deal with, you know, the intersections of racism and classism and gender identity, all of these things, nationality, and so we deal with all those things in our book. And several of the topics that, one topic, it's about divorce in our communities now. And
yeah, because as you know, it's so easy. Everyone wants to think that, well, you know, we've got marriage, but you know, that's an important thing. As we know, when some marriages break up, and you need the legal structure to support people as they dissolve their unions.
Yes. And so there's been a lot of research on that issue. Rachel Farr and Abby Goldberg both have been doing work on that as well. And also what happens to the children. So that is a concern. And of course, you know, parents being able to work things out and talk things out, as in any family, is very, very important. And then having the support of your community. And so that's why having laws, having social service agencies understand our families and not continue to heap, you know, the minority stress on us from, you know, from heteronormativity is really critical. So that's another topic that is really, we have dealt with in our book, even though it's a difficult topic. And then as you know, I have authored a chapter with Krista Craven, who is an anthropologist, on child loss. And I wrote this chapter because my own son, who was gay, when he was 23 years old, he took his own life. And as a result of a breakup, and I think he also suffered from some anxiety issues as well. And so this was, you know, this is one of those devastating losses that many of us really have to struggle to come back from. And my co-author, Krista, is an expert on reproductive loss, losing a child through a miscarriage or failed pregnancy or of some kind, and she also has written about like failed adoptions. You know,
Right.
these are the topics that no one wants to talk about, and we're doubly marginalized because, especially if we are dealing with homophobia in relation to it. And so we've brought a theory to bear on that called disenfranchised grief.
Wow.
And ambiguous loss, and all of us experience loss. We, as a culture, don't really know how to talk about it. But then when you have situations that are marginalized and that really have a lot of stigma associated with them, and which parents are blamed. I mean, no one is more blamed for a child's death than the parent, than the mother.
I know. And I
so,
can't imagine, because I just
Yeah.
know how supportive you are of everyone in our family and in your community.
Yeah.
It's
But
devastating.
But we do have to talk about these things and help prepare families for them, and find hope. So one thing that I've done, in addition to the privilege of writing this chapter with another scholar who has experienced, Krista Craven, who has experienced child loss, but also to be in the book and to have the support of Abby, my co-author through this, my co-editor through all of this. It's so important to have activism. And so in my own home community, I have started a group for any parent or grandparent or sibling who's lost an adolescent or adult child.
Right. Now, as activism, what do you mean by the activism? What are we talking about?
Yeah, well, the kind of what you've given your life to, starting the Pride Center in New Haven, and speaking out. A lot of us, really like to talk about ourselves, so we start with a methodology called autoethnography, which is situating an experience in your own life and then telling that story with the tools of science. So our chapters that are featuring that do use the tools of science. We use theory, we use other research, but we do situate it in this is the real life situation. This is how it happened. So it's not just it's not a hand wringing, a woe is me. It's trying to analyze how these things happen to us. So that's a methodology that I think has an activist end to it, because we're saying this happened to a real person, and let's put it out there. And then one thing, like on Krista Craven's, what she's done is she's established a website where people can tell their reproductive, other LGBTQ people can tell their reproductive loss stories. And Ari Lev, who has a chapter with Shannon Sennett in our book on clinical issues with LGBTQ parent families and prospective parents, she started a website for bereaved parents like us. She also lost her son, and so these are on Facebook. She started a Facebook page, and that's a form of activism, bringing it out to the people. It's not just like talking, scholars talking amongst ourselves. It's also taking our work and making it known to other people.
Because this sort of thing isn't
That's what
really,
we're doing here.
Yeah, I know. And it's not really, there's not a lot of historical context for this either.
Yeah, for talking about difficult family issues. Yeah.
And especially LGBTQ issues.
Yes, because we've been, we don't want people to say, oh, that's because they're gay. That's why that happened to them, or if you had a different lifestyle, if your son wasn't a second generation queer, he would still be alive. I mean, that's the kind of things, that people will say. And so we're saying, no, that's not the issue. That's not what it is. But having to talk about the agonizing process without it, for me, it's also, what can we do about this?
Right.
Okay, so now what? What can we do now?
Right.
So I'm devoted to that.
Well, that just leads into the next thing. In our final remaining moments, what is on the future of for LGBTQ families? What are you seeing? I mean, what's the scholarly perspective on this?
Well, there's, like I said, there's much more work about trans family issues, much more work about more sophisticated data sets. Stephen Russell of University of Texas, he's written he and his colleagues have written a fantastic chapter about that. The use of social media
in
in creating
huge,
community and in conducting research.
Right.
I think the baby boomers, those of us who were in our 60s and over, LGBTQ individuals who were baby boomers, there's so much that we have to mind.
We didn't get a chance to really talk about this, but that's one of the things that I'm seeing in our local community is that the retirement centers and the assisted living places are actively starting to recruit within to get people that are gay, lesbian, to come into their places for because we don't necessarily have a lot of family members to help take care or oversee some of the things as we age, as the baby boomers age.
Yeah, so I think that's also what's going to happen there as well. And then the fact that young people are disentangling marriage from parenthood, and many of the young people in our community, they don't think, they think you can have a child right away as soon as you start your relationship. So there's all kinds of ways to create families, to make families happen.
Right.
Yeah. It's a very exciting topic.
It is an exciting time, and
yes.
and I just think about where we've been in our own family.
Yes.
And I just feel that my issues right now are so vanilla. They just, the community is just taken off in so many different, diverse and wonderful ways. It's just a thrill to come to the community center and and to experience firsthand the diversity that goes on.
Guess what? That reminds me of something. I don't know if we have time to talk about it, but I bet there are generational issues, because as we did things our way, young people are doing things their way. And I wonder, so having a family perspective, knowing about family dynamics and family insights and family conflict will probably help in the community, because there are real generational issues as the way we did things as pioneers and as activists than the way that young people do them now. So I have to keep trying to tell myself what Elizabeth Cady Stanton said: I will not grow conservative with age.
Right.
Because
I get more liberal with age.
Of course.
I know. Well, this has been so much fun to talk
you,
about
my dear.
our family and about all the exciting work that you are doing in Virginia Tech. Of course, I've been the beneficiary of that for the last 30 years,
As I have
and but it's such a delight to share that with a wider audience.
Yes.
And thank you so much, sister, for coming on here. I really
Thank you,
appreciate
bro.
it. Well, we've been talking about LGBTQ families on Alden, New Haven, and I'm your host, John Allen, and we've been talking with Dr. Catherine Allen of Virginia Tech, a family studies scholar at Virginia Tech. And thank you so much. Until next time.